which is actually a national chapter for everybody across the nation to join and talk about newcomings and psychedelics and everything else. So, welcome you guys. Thank you guys so much for coming in and helping us out in the past little bit. We've had a great relationship with getting some of our initiatives started and moving forward, and it's been really, it's been really fun to watch this community kind of grow and gain a lot of traction in the right direction. It feels like, the early days of medical cannabis and everything. It's kind of just restarting, but at a little bit faster pace. So I'll let you guys introduce yourself. We have Ellen, who's the current president of the UCSB Psychedelics Club.
I am.
Round of applause.
Go ahead. Hi, I'm Ellen. I'm a third-year pharmacology major, applied psychology minor at UCSB, and I'm the president.
Give us a why. Give us a why.
Give us a why.
Why a UCSB Psychedelic Club?
Ooh. Okay, I was actually practicing this in the morning. So I first started getting interested in psychedelic research right before I came to college, because I've always really been interested in like chemistry and drugs and how the brain works. And then I thought, wow, these are drugs. They work on the brain.
Yeah.
So that's what first got me into it. So I Googled UC Santa Barbara psychedelics, and the club had actually just started like 2 quarters before I showed up.
Oh, wow.
So it was perfect. So I emailed them, and it was super small because of COVID, and everything was on Zoom. So I just showed up to a Zoom meeting, and everyone was really accepting and really loving. And just the vibes were so good from the beginning that I kind of just had to stay. And ever since, we've really grown a lot and changed a lot. And it's beautiful to see how that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how long ago was that?
So I'm a third year, so it's about 4 years ago it started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
I wish both of us lived in Isla Vista. And when I heard, I was like, UCSB Psychedelics Club? I was like, where was that the entire time I lived in Isla Vista? Like, there was...
that was literally my friends and I. That's what we call ourselves. True story. All right, next up.
The original social network.
I'm Kiana. I am the former president, so I was the president last year, and now I kind of act as an advisor. Like, I help Ellen out whenever she has questions or like needs advice on something, help the board out. And I also work with the national chapter. So like it was mentioned, Psychedelic Club is a national organization that has chapters all over the country, and they're not all university chapters. Some of them are just community-based. A lot of them actually are just community-based. So now that I've like moved past my...
Sorry about that.
Now that I've moved past my role as president, I'm like getting involved with the national organization because they're undergoing restructuring. So right now that's kind of what I'm doing, is like helping work as a liaison between the school and them, and also helping them to like recreate their values and to like create a mission statement and create guidelines by which clubs, individual from the national organization, can operate.
Yeah. No, that's all.
Do you know roughly how many chapters total?
I have no idea. But if you're curious, you can look at the psychedelicclub.com, or maybe it's .org, and they have a map of all the chapters, and they have information about how you can start one.
Mm-hmm. Where did that start? Like, was there like a central like group that's just like, wait, we can create a club and it's about psychedelics and we can have it at every single one?
Yeah, it started at CU Boulder, so like that's kind of still where the that's kind of still where the home base is. And I think that they just started in their own organization, like own friend group at school, and then expanded it out into this like national organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. And
batter up.
Yep. Pressure's on.
My name's Roxy. I'm the art chair this year for Psychedelic Club, and I'm studying painting in the College of Creative Studies at UCSB. So I came into college like not with any specific interest in science, and I was taking art class and like related fields. And then
This was also during COVID, so it was on Zoom.
So I started completely on Zoom, and I was home. I wasn't even in Isla Vista, and I stumbled across Psychedelic Club on Shoreline, and I was like, what?
What is that?
And so I just showed up to one of the Zoom meetings, and honestly, it was probably the best class that I went to all year. Like, every week I would show up, and I didn't really have a lot to participate in. Like, I didn't really know a lot about the science and about a lot of the research that was happening, but I got to learn, and that was something that really interested me. And then last year, coming to the club, I wasn't on the board, but I was doing... I started kind of a project on my own doing note-taking at each of the meetings. So I would synthesize what people were talking about in, like, drawings and in, like, short phrases and stuff, just, like, random things that stuck with me. And through that, I compiled, like, 2 zines from fall and winter quarter of just, like, the things that happened in the club. So it was something that I was doing in my art practice. So this year I was able to, like, be involved with the board and, like, take all of those deep thoughts about the space and, like, that process and be able to, like, input it into what we're doing in the club.
Awesome.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really cool how, like, obviously, because with District216, like, the 4 pillars are art, music, cannabis, and psychedelics, kind of how all of those kind of relate. And there's so much overlap in between, like, so many areas of psychedelics and just how the mind works. Like you were saying, it's just like, this is like drugs. I always used to say, like, drugs are kind of like cheat codes for the game, for your brain. It's like when you're playing video games, it's like, okay, cool, here's how we hack this. But it's really interesting how everybody comes from kind of different perspectives that all kind of find this
This common ground.
Common ground in there with psychedelics in different capacities. So it's really interesting to hear, like, you know, you have your art major, you have your actual brain schematic mastermind,
Chemistry,
and
She's also brain.
I'm also brain.
Yep.
Yeah.
So are a lot of your members people that are coming from different areas? Do you see a lot of that kind of, like, diversity in what sparks people's interest with psychedelics and why that kind of comes into that play?
So I would say we do have a good amount of diversity. We have some art, we have some political science, we have some environmental studies, and then we have a lot of biology, a lot of psychology, because a lot of people do want to know about the brain. But it's really cool because it allows us to have diversity in meetings, and so sometimes we'll have guest speakers who are in, you know, a university studying psychedelics, and they're going to talk about their stuff. Or sometimes, you know, we have political figures, or we have, like, art meetings and we just draw together, or we have, like, philosophy majors and we have a discussion about some deep
religious studies,
thought.
everything. That's something that I was just kind of thinking on too, as, like, part of my why is that I always, every time I went to psychedelic club, I would learn something new, but that didn't just come from, like, one thing. Like, the neuroscience always really amazed me, and then it was also, like, the culture, and then it was the art, and then it was, like, the history of the culture, and that of, like, the 60s in the modern time, and also, like, the thousands of years old traditions of the indigenous people, and, like, all of it. Like, it all is so amazing, and it goes over so many disciplines and we have the space where we can all come together and talk and share what we know about this one thing and make this holistic thing happen.
Yeah, it's super cool. It's like once you go down that rabbit hole, it just keeps coming up and coming up and coming up.
And everyone's experience is so individualistic.
Yeah.
And everyone's history is so special, and like beyond just what they're studying and what they're interested in, like their personal story. So it's perfect.
Not only that, but just the fact that all those individuals can say things in a space that's really accepted.
Yes.
All of those experiences,
Safe
like
space.
everyone who has spoken at the club, like, has a voice and is acknowledged.
It's like weekly therapy.
It's awesome.
It's just like a decompression of everything that happened in the past week.
Yeah.
I love that.
Or even something we found is that, like, there are people who come who say, like, my friends from home think that this is weird. Like, they think that my interest in this is weird, and now I'm in a space where nobody thinks it's weird and everybody thinks it's real. And, like, if I tell you that I became a jaguar, you're gonna take me seriously, you know? Or, like, you're gonna look at me with empathy and not like I'm insane.
Yeah.
You're like, what was your dose? I would like to try
Exactly. What was that again?
Awesome. So we actually got connected through Larry Norris, who from Decriminalization, who we brought in to talk about kind of policy changing and how we can create policy change here in Santa Barbara. We started the initiative here to decriminalize entheogenic plants and fungi here in Santa Barbara, the city first, and then we're going to go to the county. And with that, he was talking to you guys already. What is
I think he double dipped his trip and met with us.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you.
exactly.
Again,
He was getting
yeah.
things done.
I mean,
Yeah.
by the next day, he was bringing you all
Yeah.
back here, and we connected. So how did that come about with Larry?
So basically, I had a friend that brought up this idea. He said, "So I know you're trying to do outreach. Have you heard of this organization?" And I was like, maybe like a couple years ago. I don't know. And so I looked them up, and it's honestly so easy to find emails to just email.
Yep.
And a lot of the times they respond, which is really cool.
Yeah, isn't it?
Especially in our niche community, like people are actually trying to get out there and get more contacts. So yeah, so I emailed him, he responded, and we talked a little bit. And honestly, the first thing that hit me was that his emails were so well written.
Oh yeah.
Like they had all the information I needed. I didn't have to guess anything.
Dr.
And he
Larry.
had personality in his emails, which meant so much to me.
Yeah.
So that's when I really was like, okay, this is probably gonna be good. And then yeah, he said he was gonna be in Santa Barbara with you guys. I had no idea who you were.
Yep.
I had to look you up.
Yeah.
And,
No, we were like,
yeah.
wait, this thing, what?
And then he said, let's get breakfast. I want to introduce you to these people.
Yeah.
And so I brought along our new policy chair, who is now working with that.
We'll be up here soon enough, don't you?
And we met, and it was like click.
Yep.
It was perfect. And I came here and saw this, and I knew it had to happen. So that's where we are.
Yeah, and like we brought Larry down, and really it was the same thing for me. I was like, because we had just launched a couple months before, and it was like, okay, cool. Who do we need to talk to? What areas do we need to talk to? And then Larry Norris came across my desk, I guess, and was, okay, cool. Policy is a huge facet of this. And then talking to him, same thing. Just shot an email out. Hey, I would love to have a conversation to see if you'd be interested. Wrote back, super, very attentive email saying like, yes, let's do this. I have reason to be down there. And it just kind of all flowed really quickly. And, we keep bringing it up. It's kind of like the mycelium network just growing and just bringing things into everybody's just kind of getting connected. And once that connection happens, it's like, oh, well, we're connected with 10 other people and 10 other people and 10 other people. And so when we had that meeting, and it was really interesting to see it flow from, okay, great, we had Larry here, now we have the initiative, now we have you guys helping us with the initiative. I think the marquee event, you guys came and were involved, and we had over 100 signatures in that night.
We'll
150.
give them some context real quick. So
Yeah.
this is the district house. We also have every other month a larger event called our marquee events. For those of you who haven't been, it takes over the parking lot out here on the inside. We had about 227 people at the last one, and basically we do a nice panel. So we had 4 people on the stage talking about plant medicine. We had live music, we had a stand-up comedian, and also inside the building we have different brand activations in different areas within the building. And one of those spots was Ellen and Co. manned our petition to decriminalize plant medicine, to decriminalize entheogenic plants and fungi specifically. And yeah, you generated over 100 signatures that night. So thank you. Out of the 227. So we had an almost 50% rate, and the petition still stands on the back or on the front counter there. So please, anyone who's in Santa Barbara and can put down their email and whatnot, sign that. We would love to get that quite a bit higher than I think we're almost at 200.
And we also have it at High Tide and Santa Barbara CBD for in-person locations. If you have any friends that you want to tell and say, hey, come sign this, you can go to those locations. High Tide is right down the street on Gutierrez. Santa Barbara CBD is up on De La Vina. You can go in at any time, sign the petition, have your friends go by. They're open 7 days a week.
Yeah, and so when Larry gave his presentation here, he said, look, we've done this 16 times. 16 cities have decriminalized.
Wow.
And so my one and only question to him was like, what is it going to take to make us 17? And so we launched right into calls to action, met with this group, and here we are with an initiative. So the plan moving forward, and then we'll get back to this, is just so everyone's aware, we're going to take the signatures and some key stories. Anybody that has a story of how these plants and fungi have impacted their lives in a positive way and wants to write a story, we have a great letter template that you can use. And we're taking that to City Hall, and we're finding ourselves a champion within the City Council. And once we have a champion, we get on the agenda. and then we get to go make noise at City Hall. We get to go get 2 minutes on the mic and
Yep.
talk about our stories and hopefully get the city council to adopt this initiative to decriminalize.
Yep.
So,
Moving things forward.
so hopefully we'll remember 17 here.
Yes.
That's the goal. So thanks for letting me interject. I
No,
like context.
please.
Context is good. Yeah.
Please, always. And it's amazing too, because like you've given us the platform to be able to do all this. I mean, obviously, like when I started working with this entire thing, my passion was to see exactly this. It's like how we can create a community that entrusts, to create a better world for the next generation that's coming in front of us, so that
Good tie into our theme today.
I know, exactly. Because it is, you've created this space that is welcoming for everybody to have their art, that have their art up, have events, have a safe place for people to congregate and talk about this. And that's where now just filling that platform with the people that are passionate as you and passionate as everybody wants to get these things moving forward. So after Larry came in and we did the marquee event and you guys did all of that, kind of what were you expecting when you guys came to the marquee event?
So we don't like to live life with expectations.
Sure.
You listen to the plants.
Yeah. So that's what I'm really trying to put into my life. But I think that we really didn't expect anything. We thought it would be a cool way to meet with similar-minded people, and it was really interesting because like we have this organization at a university, but like what's the next step? What's going to happen when we graduate? What community are we going to be a part of? Like what's going to be the vibe, And so we kind of came in, we were thinking, are we going to like them or not? I don't know. And it worked out. Yeah, well, we'll see. But it was really refreshing to see that this isn't, I get a lot like this is a phase. I hear from a lot of people in my life like, oh, you're just 20. Like, this is just something that you're interested in right now. Like, but one day you're going to grow up and you're going to realize that, like, the world isn't like that. And that's so sad.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool that, like, I guess we're all just in this phase for a really long time. So, so. Yeah.
Shows that the world is like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And make it that way.
Exactly.
Your reality is, whatever you want it to be. That's so true.
And that's one thing that I've seen is like, especially I was just at Lucidity this past weekend, which is one of my favorite festivals. I've gone for 10 years. And it's amazing because like we used to go to these festivals and be like, wow, we get to escape and go to this magical place where everybody's, community oriented and all of this stuff. And then I come back here and it's like, oh, well, we have us here. Then Will's right down the street at High Tide. And, my friends live right over here. And I'm looking at them like, life is pretty much just one big festival. It's just, you have to make it, you have to be a community and kind of come together to make that happen. And it's that.
Well said.
Yeah, and it's magic when you kind of see, especially after COVID and everyone being so isolated. It's like you just look around and you have such a community that you can kind of lean on and work together with to make things happen, and tangible things will happen. I mean, having an initiative on there when I was like, wait, so we just have to have a couple hundred people sign this piece of paper and we have the floor. That's it. I'm like, we don't have to hire some like crazy lawyer or anything. Like, all right, let's do that. Let's start there.
Here's the template.
Yep. So let's do it.
And something I think is really cool about this community, I think I've said this at the last 2 meetings we've had, is that everyone here really just wants to be like live a happier life.
Yeah.
And so when you're in this community, when you're passionate about these things, you just want to be happy. You just want to have a good time and make friends and connect with people.
Exactly.
And like find me many other communities that just do that from such an interdisciplinary perspective.
Yeah. Not all of Isla Vista, that's for sure.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Definitely.
It's not the alcohol-driven side, that's for sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
But that's actually interesting too, because like obviously we've all lived in Isla Vista in different periods of time, and we were talking about kind of how that relates. But before we get into that, I wanted to let you guys talk a little bit more about the UCSB, just the Psychedelics Club in general, what you guys do, what you guys are about, what you guys are supporting, and kind of how other people that are involved with colleges out there, how they might be able to start a club of their own in there, and how they can get involved with the organization, and how they can also support your organization.
So UCSB Psychedelic Club started when I was a first year. So basically the way that it was set up in our space is just to be like a community meeting space, and so we usually have and there's a lot of discussion that goes into that. It the main thing is that it becomes a safe space for people to share their experiences and to talk about safety, and a lot of that focus both inside and outside of our like just general meetings is about harm reduction and destigmatization. So like a lot of the work that we're doing is kind of trying to clean up after the war on drugs. Like we all grew up with like Red Ribbon Week and like signing a paper that says I'm never gonna do drugs and all these things. Like, and so we're working to rewrite the rhetoric around psychedelics, and you know we have all of this research now and like so many resources. Like it really is like inarguable to I don't know, to argue with us, to say like that there's a problem with what we're doing. So we have community-based meetings where basically we'll have like a discussion topic. So we've talked about hallucinations,
Self
and
favorite
identity.
meeting. Do it every year.
Community. I'm like blanking, but we'll have like a specific topic that we kind of try to focus our conversation around, and then let people share and let people talk about their experiences and kind of like weave those like harm reduction things in there. And
No, it's amazing to give yourself a space to share experiences while also talking about like, you know, we were talking before about kind of the philosophical side of things of like how that relates to, obviously you guys are in school learning about so much stuff, and then when you add psychedelics into the mix, it probably opens up a whole nother can of worms with like, well, maybe this can relate into these areas and go and push it even further. And I think that's like a very special time to be able to expand your mind and to run with some of those ideas, to explore them, because you have so much runway just to work with that. And how did you hear who started the UCSB Psychedelic Club?
So it was some kids that were like third and fourth years when I was a first year. So when I was a third year last year, I took over the club from like the remaining founders. A lot of them were like bio kids. But like when I'm thinking back, like a lot of them were the people that were talking about like the neuroscience and stuff, and that also were involved with Students for Sensible Drug Policy, which is another like national organization that is like working to mitigate the war on drugs and the future policy. Unfortunately, our chapter kind of like died during COVID. That's another thing that I'm really grateful for, is that like we were able to maintain our meetings throughout the whole online school BS. But yeah, it was just people. I don't know how they heard about it from CU Boulder. They might have known people at CU Boulder, but it's really cool.
There's a Berkeley chapter too.
Yeah,
I think we were first.
Yeah, we helped to the Berkeley chapter. We have the Berkeley chapter. Yeah. On that note, if you are looking to get a chapter started, like it's just the website, and there's a link. You know, if you're interested in starting a chapter in your community or at your university, there's a place to go, and you can get in contact with the people that are in charge of national, and they'll send you some information and talk about how to get started, and you know, connect you with other chapters so that you can talk about events and meetings and such things that we put on.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And do you guys organize kind of like how, I mean, it just kind of so happened that Larry and Decriminalize Nature came here and that we had this initiative. Is there kind of an overarching initiative for all the clubs to kind of follow in suit with that? Or is there an opportunity for you guys to kind of set that precedent for other people to say, hey, this is the people that you should talk to. We've done it here. You guys, because then, I mean, with you guys starting that, you could go to every single college across the nation and say, hey, you can grassroots that all the way to the top pretty quickly.
Not right now, but I think that that's kind of something that we're working on, like with the national chapter in their restructuring, because even that organization is fairly new and also struggled a lot during COVID and having everything be online. So that's like a part of the work that's happening now, is like reaching out to colleges and like getting that community really strong, and getting like the missions and the paperwork stuff, you know what I mean? Like like just the writing, this is who we are, this is how we operate, this is how you can start.
Here's our code of conduct.
Yeah, here's our code of conduct. All those things is another thing we have to talk about in the space. So yeah, that's definitely coming, and it's been really cool. Like even just in my like I guess 4 years now being involved with the club, like watching other chapters pop up, watching Berkeley pop up, watching UCSD pop up.
And everyone from other schools
Yeah.
swipes up on my story and they're like, how do I start this?
Yeah.
Like Santa Cruz and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
But wait, can I promote one more really cool organization
away.
that isn't this one, but there's an organization. It's called IPN, the Intercollegiate Psychedelic Network. I am obsessed with it. It started over COVID, and it actually is just that. It's I'm pretty sure it's international, but it's definitely here. And it is intercollegiate, so it connects undergrads, grad students, and people beyond that to each other. And they have a really active Discord. They have conferences. They're doing one in July this year, and it's only $120 to attend, which is really great for conferences.
Yep.
And it's like 2 days. It's in Philly.
Definitely.
It's at UPenn. But July 13th to 15th.
Just
Yeah,
sprinkle a little promotion in there.
Something I love about them is they really are a resource pool, and that's what I look to for how I view this club being shaped here as a resource pool. Where I went to a webinar that they were having where they had 6 grad students talk about how to go into psychedelic research in grad school, and then I emailed those grad students, and all 6 of them came and talked for us on Zoom.
Amazing.
So it's like it really is, and everyone's so welcoming and so
Yeah.
supportive, and different organizations of various psychedelic club styles, because there's a lot of them, from other schools talk about what they do. So really 10 out of 10 recommend if you want other psychedelic people.
Love it. And one more time, the name of it?
Intercollegiate Psychedelic Network.
Intercollegiate Psychedelic Network.
Yep.
Sounds like a Beastie Boys song.
That is, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Intergalactic. Awesome. Well, what we wanted to really kind of go through, what we wanted to talk about is the kind of the progression of psychedelics and also cannabis throughout kind of the generations. Obviously, we've come from everything, the war on drugs, everything being illegal and don't touch anything, and
Well, even before that, everything was legal.
well, yeah, exactly.
Which is like something we don't really talk about. Like, I don't think that that's something that very many people understand. I mean, probably this community more so maybe than others, but just like knowing that there was a time not that long ago when none of this stuff was a problem.
Nope.
And it is very recently that this stuff was decided to become a problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks, Nixon. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nixon. But yeah, I mean, when it comes into that, like, there's literally been 50 years of this discussion of it. The funny thing is that it still was happening everywhere. Like, it didn't stop anything from
Yeah.
happening. It just became
That's what I was
a
gonna
waste
say.
of time in conversation of like having to explain yourself of, yeah, I had a great time and this was really fun and I learned so much. And then somebody's like, that's illegal.
It just made it more unsafe.
Well, yeah,
That too, yeah.
It's
exactly.
now
And killed the research, push the research
Exactly.
underground.
And so and I'll let Jacob kind of take it from like when your experience there, like what was kind of what was it like then?
Spoiler alert: the
Yeah.
war on drugs was in effect when I was at school.
Yes.
Yeah. So in the 90s, in the mid to late 90s, it was all about Prop 215, which was the first big state medical marijuana law. We didn't have cannabis yet; it was still marijuana back then. We rebranded since. Now we're cannabis. Now it's good. But no, for reals. I mean, that was a time where we were figuring out this dispensary model for the first time. We were figuring out delivery services for medical purposes, and California was leading the charge. 1996 is when Prop 215 passed, and so when I started school a year or two after that, UC Santa Barbara, I quickly found, sadly didn't have this organization, but I quickly found NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, and joined the UC Santa Barbara chapter of NORML, as well as like Safe Access Now and a couple of other medical marijuana related organizations, which was all about just getting patients access to their medicine and allowing there to be a safe conversation around that. I mean, I was telling Kyle, like, at that time, and I think we have to bring technology into this conversation because I had like binders of studies that I printed out and would hand baby boomers to say, like, no, like, you're misinformed about cannabis, like this is marijuana. This is, there is medical value, whatever the thing was, or hemp, we're big into industrial hemp at that time in that conversation, pre-Farm Bill days. So For UC Santa Barbara, like psychedelics was there. It was definitely, I mean, we used them recreationally, we used them spiritually, we used them with music and whatnot. But in terms of like social political activism, it was all about medical marijuana. It was all about marijuana. We weren't even, this was not on our radar. We didn't talk about, we need to get fungi and plant medicine. I didn't even know the term plant medicine. I don't even know what Western person decided to call it that at some point in 2011, but apparently that happened. So, you know, I mean, these plants and fungi were just, they were there, but they were not part of our social activism fabric at the university level. You know, it was very much marijuana, cannabis. That was the myopic focus. And, you know, I was part of that organization probably for about 6 or 7 years post college. And I mean, they're still active. I have a creative marketing agency as a day job, and we post normal content all the time. They put out amazing studies to this day. They're a great nonprofit. They're a great source of news. They put on conferences as well, and still to this day, we try to support them in that way.
So and how did you get? Where did you get cannabis from then? I mean, the medical dispensaries really didn't open up. I know there was one
Dude
shop.
on the
There's a
street.
few. Yeah, dude on the street, right?
Well, you used to have to go and sit in his living room.
Go and hang out with
Hang
him for 2
out.
hours, yeah.
Wait.
You Gen Zs don't know how good you have it. All right? You can just go into the store and pick out your terpene profiles and know how much
I mean,
percentage of CBD
it was-
and CBG,
it was-
CBN,
yeah.
THC. I'm like,
He's stuck in the old.
I mean,
take that back, whatever that is.
It was even amazing when I was in Isla Vista and there was delivery services because there was no storefront, but there was delivery services. You go on, there's a little menu, and it's like exactly like who was talking about Robert Johnson was talking about like this 3 skull and crossbones. Like this is how hard it's gonna be. It's like, you know, they give you like just a random cookie. They're like, oh yeah, we have these cookies that are, you know, eat half of it. Don't eat more than half of it, kind of thing. And that's like kind of just like, oh yeah, cool. It's a buy one get one free. They're just kind of like unloading things
Yeah.
onto you, and you get it delivered to my house. I remember I got my medical card in 2012, and I was like so excited because I'm like, oh my god, I'm allowed to do this, and really nothing changed other than the fact that like, and it's so funny too. You'd have a you know, basically a pizza delivery guy comes up and he's like, hey, I got a box of weed. And it's like drops it all off, and then, you know, and I mean, now you guys literally have a dispensary in Isla Vista.
Yeah.
You guys can, any student that's there, I mean, they're like, oh, I'm just gonna go skate down to the dispensary and like,
You have like BOGOs with Sam's to go.
yes. Like, yeah.
It's right next to the Ivy Deli Mart.
It's ridiculous. It's like,
They
it's not
thought
even-
it through.
It's just part of your daily routine.
Yeah.
You get the laundromat, you get your sandwich, you get your weed.
There's a little bit of jealousy on
Yeah.
these ends
You can't
because
feel it.
it's like one parking lot for all of your errands instead of
Yeah.
having to go through three different places. But what is that like now? I mean, honestly, because in the future it's going to be. I mean, think about it right now. Is you guys are at the forefront of psychedelics being where it was when Jacob was in Isla Vista.
For cannabis, yeah, when it was medical marijuana only, we're sort of in that, well, psychedelics is acceptable from a medical study standpoint, and you know, 10 years from now, we're going to have dispensaries for psilocybin in Isla Vista.
Like that's, I mean, think about it, because that's where we're at, you know, like walking around telling people the research. Hey, there's research on ketamine therapy, there's research on LSD therapy, mushroom therapy. You're going around and telling the same thing, and what's going to come next? Is there going to be a delivery service driver coming by with a pizza box full of psychedelics? Or like, where do you guys think that? Where
That
do
was
you guys?
Nelson in the dorms.
Yeah. Shh, don't say names. But where do you guys like it, like where you guys see it now? Kind of looking at that trajectory, like what do you guys see the future, and what would you like to see the future of kind of this progress go towards?
I think definitely. I mean, definitely legalization on some level, and like decriminalization, obviously. But I still don't know if it will ever become that lax. Like, I still don't know if maybe after a very long time we'll get to the point where like the politicians are able to say, yes, we can sell these substances on the corner, but you know, like right now all of the research is so heavily controlled. Like if you're doing psychedelics medicinally from a research perspective, you're doing them in a therapist's office, like holding their hand basically and wearing an eye mask and headphones. So I don't know it'll ever get to that point. And I also feel like, I don't know, I feel personally, and this might just be like my personal view on things, but a little bit of concern about that because of the commercialization and because of like thinking about who's going to own that, like who's going to be in charge of that and who's going to profit off of that when there have been so many people whose communities and cultures have been so harmed. And it's the same for marijuana. Like,
Oh, of course.
it's absolutely the same for marijuana. Like a disproportionate number of brown and black people like being put in jail for minor drug charges. And, you know, now we have the exact opposite group of people owning all of the recreational marijuana that you can get. So I feel like there is that kind of concern, and we've seen that played
150
out.
years ago, it's tobacco. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, you can trace this back to the beginning
Yeah.
of agriculture.
Yeah. So that's a concern, and I think also just like understanding kind of like, I don't know, this is something we've been trying to have a conversation about, is understanding the weight of these substances, because they are something that you can use recreationally, but that can very, very, very quickly become a life-altering experience. And I think that that's important for people to understand and realize, like, it's not the same as like smoking weed with your buddies after work.
Totally.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like it can be an all-day experience. It can be something that changes the course of your life, or your whole even mental chemistry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's we've had the first marquee event that we had was actually with a group called Interstate, and their entire thing was looking at the intention setting, the experience, and the integration, and that's been a huge facet of, because you have both sides. Obviously, these have been safeguarded by Indigenous people for a long time. Our last panel that we had spoke a lot about how do we approach this new industry without completely degrading ecological areas and communities that are relying on this. I mean, in the 60s, peyote was almost farmed to extinction.
Yeah.
You know, cannabis is not sustainable. I mean, I've owned a couple farms, and definitely not a water shy plant.
Yeah.
But when you look at this on a grand scale, when you're talking about 8 billion people that might want access to psychedelics in different capacities in plant medicine, or however you want to call it, there is some serious hurdles, and you do have a great point about the commercialization, but there's also how do you balance the commercialization with accessibility, and let them have an opportunity to give everyone access to these things without having it be going through the same cycles that we've gone through. You know, anytime something becomes popular, even ayahuasca and peyote takes 30 years to flower.
Yeah.
There's not enough to go around. But mescaline can be synthesized in a lab.
Yeah.
And then it's showing, they're doing studies on mescaline testing for alcohol addiction and a lot of other things. So maybe synthesizing it could have a better route medicinally, where the spiritual journey can go this direction. But those are the kind of conversations now that's like, okay, where did we mess up in the past? And how do we not do that going forward?
Yeah.
And I think that's where now with social media and all these platforms, we can create kind of the conversation on record to say, okay, cool, let's not do this again.
Yeah.
Let's go to this direction. Let's see how this works, because we do have the resources.
I think that especially in psychedelics, the number one thing, honestly, is education for the public.
I was thinking
Like,
that.
right? Like, we try in our club, we try to talk about intention setting and integration, and like set and setting, harm reduction, in the beginning of the quarter usually, just so that everyone's on the same page. But it's so important as this becomes more of a trend, more popular, companies start popping up. People with the money, you have to question sometimes whether they're here for the right reasons, which is something I've been thinking a lot about in the scientific community in general when it comes to research and getting funded. Who do you get funded by? Are they the right people? What's the industry looking like, right? And as this gets trendier, and we're kind of in that gray area between illegal to decriminalized to legalized, like that space, there's a lot of harm that could happen if people don't know, and one thing I think is really important is the destigmatization aspect with the education, because there's a lot of different sentiments coming around from like past generations, and a lot of immigrants that come from places where like drugs of all kinds were all the same, and it's like
It's illegal, like
it's illegal, and like they think of people with like scab marks up and down their arms from like heroin and stuff like that, and then I tell them about psychedelics, and they're like, you're in a just a lot of negativity, which doesn't really make sense. Yeah, and so there's just so many aspects when it comes to psychedelics. Like, it's so beautiful that it's so interdisciplinary. It comes to the ecological impact. It comes to the spiritual impact, the societal impact, like industry, money, and whatever, and medicinal. But then you really have to think about all of that as you're promoting this. And actually, I just read an article about a couple articles. I was writing a paper about this, about the studies done for addiction specifically, and they found, fun fact, peyote can actually decrease your odds. Lifetime use of peyote can actually decrease your odds for cocaine use disorder by 50%. And none of the other substances really showed any significant data, which I thought was interesting.
That's really interesting.
But that's a different topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's just, I agree.
But there's so much good research coming out, and even on talking about cocaine, it's like there's a lady down in South America right now that's studying on the actual coca plant before it's refined and looking at the medicinal benefits of that plant, because it has been used as for altitude sickness and a lot of other things for thousands of years. Once you refine it, same thing with heroin, same thing with everything. Once you refine it and you make it this super potent, powerful thing that really messes with you. That's where that stigma lies, is that this thing is going to completely destroy your life, when in reality it's like if you took caffeine and you just had a
pill,
a dose of caffeine, however you want to put that, but that could be extremely harmful, and caffeine is considered a drug. It's actually categorized as a drug, but it's legal because it's naturally occurring, but we haven't refined it down into that sense. So there's nuances in there that I think are starting to open up in the way that we look at things, and I think having conversations like this really opens people's minds to destroy those stigmas and saying, like, these things, they're naturally occurring, they exist, they grow out of the ground. It's somebody out there went there and took it and tried to put it all together to get high, and that's where. And then again, capitalism fueling that entire fire of, oh great, we can make money off of this, and you lose sight out of the initial. You lose sight of the initial offering of, it's a plant that has medicinal benefits. And I think that's where right now there's so many different areas, and there's so many. When you go to college and you're like, what do I want to do, and you find that kind of that one thing, psychedelics opens up this huge Pandora's box of all of these little. Focal points that you could really go deep into, because they haven't been touched.
Do you have, as an organization, any kind of curriculum around like what destigmatization efforts look like? Is there actual actions that you can take to try to destigmatize psychedelics? Because we sorry to ask the question and then cut you off, but we actually
Do you think?
use the word psychedelics intentionally when describing District216. There was several people that pushed back and said, you ought to find a different word. And I said, no, we're taking this word back. Yes. It's a great word. So are there efforts that you can do? Are there actions you can take?
I think so. I mean, even just like tabling,
opening the conversation.
At the school, like people come up, people who like, what, like you were saying, who come from a place where drugs are completely illegal, like, but also people who come, like, I'm from Berkeley. I grew up in the Bay Area. I would go to Dolores Park in high school, and people would walk up with, like, a basket of whatever. And that was something that was taught to me when I was young. And, like, there's also a lot of people in our club who are coming in who have that rhetoric already of, like, this is something that's really normal for some people.
Right.
And, like, balancing that out and also saying, like, hey, this is not normal for everyone. It's also okay. And like having that discussion like right off the bat when we're talking to people about the club, when we're like introducing the space. That's like, we talk about that first meeting of the quarter, but also, even earlier than that, and making sure to promote those things too.
And really promoting the values that we want out there. So we do really care, Moderation. We really care about, we talk a lot about moderation.
We didn't know what microdosing was.
And talking about like really promoting that safe environment and
set and
setting. And there's just so much, and I really think starting that conversation. We have a trip report thing. Awesome. We have an incident report thing. We have a lot going on. But really starting that conversation is a great place to start. But yeah, it really does raise the question, what specific agenda, what curriculums, right, could we create? Actually,
Ideas.
we have a harm reduction doc
Yeah.
that was created in the past
Yeah.
by, I think, from Berkeley and from our club,
Yeah.
right? And that's out on our website, on our email. And then also recently, I was talking to one of the IPN people, and she actually just sent like a full email of just links upon documents of just resources.
Yeah.
From everything you can imagine, all drugs, psychedelics, it was crazy. So we're putting that into a document. Yeah, and then on top of that, just having a loving community. People are
Yeah,
gonna be like, "Oh, I'm curious about psychedelics. I've heard a lot of bad things about them. Maybe I should check it out." They show up. They like the people. Boom.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, that's a good segue to get me out of this chair and to get some more of the club into the chairs. So
Yeah, and give
do
you
have
guys the floor.
someone that you want to start with and
Does somebody want to
get some more perspectives? But we're going to feature some more of the UCSB Psychedelic Club members.
Does
Yep.
anyone in the front and the back?
If there's a topic that anybody would like to talk about.
Does anyone have thoughts that they want to share?
Yeah, I'm gonna start picking people.
Got the power.
Yeah. I thought you guys sat in the front to come up.
Yeah.
I just like pointed at someone. So
And if you wouldn't mind, please introduce yourself.
hello, I'm Tanya.
Tanya.
I'm pretty new to this board. I'm the policy chair,
Yeah, you are.
and I study political science and psychology and brain science. So this is kind of in the very happy middle of all of my interests.
Yeah, good little overlap.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know you were here. I mean, I met both of you guys together when we met with Larry, and then you were here for the marquee event. Is there something, like, from a political science standpoint, is there something that you see kind of what you're seeing now happening in terms of community and building and everything, of kind of like what you learn in school? Like, is there a difference, or is it kind of, is there some polarized process in there from what you're learning versus what is actually happening?
Versus what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to decipher the question.
Yeah.
As I said though, I am pretty new to this space.
Of course.
Especially from a policy perspective, I'm more of the political philosophy route.
Okay.
So that's why I'm drawn to psychedelics. Also, I'm a very philosophical, spiritual person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really understand the question.
So I guess let me rephrase it, and then you give me a little bit more context to work with. Is that obviously when you're in school and you're learning about this is how things are supposed to be. These are your great philosophers of different areas that have ideals that could be applied to community and political agendas. With kind of the space that we're in right now, and kind of having to go and explain kind of things that as more science comes out, it's more prevalent than ever that, hey, this is beneficial. We should look into this. This could actually help people. From a political, a poli-sci standpoint, is there? Do you think the books are going to be rewritten based off of how the outcome of psychedelics kind of plays out in the world? No pressure.
This is your 4
You'll
years
watch
of
this. You'll watch this in
education.
20 years. You'll watch this in 20 years and be like, oh. Yes, exactly. No, she will be. It is.
Yeah.
To be honest, the political science perspective from my experience is very pessimistic.
Okay.
It pretty much, especially if you're like in the international relations stage, it's all about war. It's all about minimizing conflict instead of promoting positive change in the political space. But I think for me, the thing that it's most taught me that's contributed to the psychedelic conversation is all of the limits that exist, all of the barriers that exist to implementing a psychedelic culture, to pushing it into the mainstream, especially in a capitalist, individualistic society that we live in today. But I think that actually makes psychedelics even more prevalent for the society that we live in, especially in America, because capitalism tries to disentangle connective fabrics.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Wow.
Okay,
that was good.
It tries to push the agenda of hyper-individualism, that you can survive on your own, that, you know, it's all about the work that you put in, that you have to, like, make yourself into your personal brand, your personal success. That community isn't necessary. If anything, it's, like, extraneous or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, from a political perspective, psychedelics are extremely important in reviving community, because that's something that is very absent
Mm-hmm.
in our communities today, or
Dang.
in our societies.
I'm just gonna give you a little great job on that one.
That was well done.
No, because it is important, and I actually asked ChatGPT like, does no, I'm not, let me finish this. Is that I asked it, does capitalism create an inherently greedy society?
Yeah.
Is the question that I asked, and what it came back to me is said that not necessarily, you know, you can't account it just for that. However, that by creating individualism within society, saying that you have to take care of yourself, you have to provide for yourself, and you have to do all of this, will inherently create segmented parts of society. You can't have a community if everybody's so focused on themselves. If you're so worried about the next person taking over or doing anything, you know, and comparing it to the other three, communism and socialism, as, you know, inherently out of those three, capitalism is going to create an individualistic society which cannot create community.
And I feel like it's important, like it is important. I think it is necessary to promote, like, all of this research and all this money needs to come from somewhere, you know? But that's kind of where the integration part comes in for me, where I think, like, you can learn connection and energy and community and then integrate that into your life and make this hyper individualistic society not so much, you know? Like,
People can do that on their own, and then, like, if enough people are doing that, like, the overarching push to be individualistic is going to inherently be diminished.
because overall we are here for like self-preservation is important, you know. We are humans, individuals, but that's kind of why I think psychedelics gives you like that opening window, you know, and it lets you apply it to your life, and that's so useful.
I agree with that. I feel like capitalism plays on our fear, and then that makes us greedy because we're worried about our own individual survival. And psychedelics are one of the ways, like, even in the research, like, one of the, like, symptoms of using psilocybin is like universal connectedness, like feeling like
oh no
feeling connected with the people around you and with the environment, and understanding that you're one thing, like that is a product of the use of these substances. And like that's it, and I think that this is something that we kind of forget a little bit in our community, like, because like we were talking about earlier, like we are just allowed to exist, like in like the past, even at UCSB, like this would be an unthinkable thing, and especially like during the high time of the war on drugs, like totally an unthinkable thing. But this is still radical, like we're still in a very radical space, and to be able to talk about this, and like to even be able to like feel that oceanic boundlessness and the universal connectedness and the like infinite love that these substances provide us with is like really kind of extreme. And you know, I think it's kind of about like finding maybe the middle point and bringing those things into our real world and how we operate as individuals.
I think that just on the topic of community is that a healthy community is made up of a diverse group of individuals. It's a healthy individualistic space, or like every individual piece brings a piece of the puzzle. And you can't have a healthy community without individualism. So it's kind of hand in hand. So you can't go and say that, but if everybody kind of conforms into the same oneness, then you don't really have any diversity in the community. But it's kind of a beautiful thing where you can bring out the diversity, and you can kind of look at the differences as a strength. You know, you lean on each other's strengths. Like one person's weakness might have a strength from somebody else that they can help, and that's where the community fits together like a puzzle. And so there's no, you know, it's not saying that there's too much individualism or too much community. It's kind of finding that sweet spot of becoming a confident individual and knowing where you are and knowing what your strengths are and knowing where to go. And so that you can then find other people that know where they want to go and help each other out.
Yeah.
That's so true.
And I think that's really the goal of everything. It's not one person can do everything, and there's not one team that can do everything. It's finding out and just so as we've done this, like I said, it really is like a mycelium network. It's like a mycelium network. It's like every time it's like, oh, cool, we need this, and oh, you guys have all of this. Okay, we'll help you with this. You help with this, and it's like, you know, not fully bartering. I mean, money will always exist. It's a great way, and if you look, I mean, money is not the devil necessarily. It does serve a purpose of, I'm not going to bring you 1,000 pounds of grain or something and trade you for your 20 oxen or whatever it is. But, you know, it does help with kind of the transactional side of it. But it does, you know, when it controls a lot of the macro, you know, pharmaceutical side of things and everything else. So there's a necessary evil within it. But I think that really with the community base, you can't take that away. You know, building that healthy community is kind of the first step to doing that.
I think that's something that our generation also like really needs, just with the fact that a lot of us have grown up on social media and like found community in this like mass of like corporate
hysteria.
Just I don't know, it's like so much.
Yeah.
And like also continuous and all the time, and like there is an expectation there to just like keep doing that and keep doing more and keep like absorbing more and become this like part of this conglomerate of of people and like
of creators and consumers,
Yeah.
like just doing that circle thing,
and kind of leaving that space to like actually find yourself and like not become yourself within that space is something that I don't know could help that balance. Or like for me it has helped that balance of just like being in this community where we can literally sit down and just talk for an hour. Like you don't have to be on your phone. You shouldn't be on your phone.
You won't want to
You
be
don't
on your phone.
If you're on your phone, maybe you should think about why you're on your phone.
Exactly. Because that's the cool thing too, is like, you know, social media is a great tool. I mean, honestly, like it's a great tool to be able to share with people all over the world and take information from all over the world. But when that information becomes fake or, you know,
or toxic,
manufactured, you know, and it's sometimes, you know, it's not intentionally toxic. It's kind of the outcome of, you know, ego or you know, anything that comes in with that. But when when you use a tool wrong, you're gonna get bad results. You know, like you're going to have those effects, and especially with social media, where people, if they had a confident individual, you know, a confident individual in a community, that would create a healthy social media network. But the problem is right now is that we have a lot of you know, lack of health in the mental areas or you know, whatever, physical, mental, anything that you look at.
We're given that as a remedy. Like
But
we like I got a phone in middle school and that was like, here you go, like
sure.
And I know a lot of people did that too, like.
Sure, but when people feel like they're not able to share at the level of what they see online, and this is a great thing with Margot when we had this talk about you know, taking back your power and empowering people through their bodies through a lens, and looking at, you know, kind of their, you know, the things that might not be so great about their body, but still loving it all the same, and like taking that power back so that you're not comparing yourself to the manufactured things you see on the screen, because it is manufactured, it is photoshopped, it is, you know, they took the whole magazine debacle and they put it on the screen for everybody to use, every filter, every thing that they use,
specifically geared to do that.
And it's like, no, that's not real, and that makes people shy away from actually communicating and talking with people. They're like, oh, is my hair okay? Or oh, is this like, you know, oh, I don't have the newest clothes, or oh, he has the newer iWatch or Apple Watch or whatever. But that's the thing, is like people get so caught up in their heads about what that is that they lose sense of the actual community of connecting with people.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I can really appreciate kind of your guys' mindset, and gives me a little bit of hope for what's to come.
It's hard too, because it's something that is like instead of building your, I mean, this was maybe like my experience is like, instead of building your individual, like how you relate to the world, like social media is kind of just the default. Like it's like the first thing.
Yes.
And then you build yourself off of that. And I think that provides a lot of space for a lot of those unhealthy or even like addictive behaviors to arise, like with receiving validation from outside sources and I don't know, just like consuming certain kinds of content that might like promote unhealthy behaviors or I don't know,
Yeah.
issues and
And I think that's where psychedelics come in. They kind of force you to take a break. They force you to reconsider that and really think about that.
Like, how many of you guys look at your phone when you're on
When you're
psychedelics? Because,
no.
like, then my phone is the last thing. I'm like, you are staying over there, and I will see you in 8 hours.
I feel like the psychedelic community and the psychedelic club in general kind of felt like the continuation of a psychedelic trip for me.
Yeah.
Because it was pretty much
Forever.
the only place on campus where you just came to talk to people and be present, and you weren't there because you were trying to build up your resume, or it wasn't like
True.
a political thing where you're trying to like build yourself up or something. Like, it was the only place where people genuinely came just to be with each other.
Yeah.
And that's another thing with psychedelics. It's like, I really try to be wary of any businesses or perspectives that try to portray psychedelics as a tool for something, as in like a tool for productivity, a tool for focus. You know, I think it's a holistic medicine in and of itself that should be respected, not something else to make us more productive.
Yeah.
Contributing to
It's
that's-
not,
like-
yeah,
like,
contributing
it's
to
just
society.
Like, the
That
society created the problem.
Interesting.
Then it took a solution to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Which just kind of
Wow.
Perpetuates the cycle.
perpetuates
That's
the same
interesting,
cycle.
yeah.
And that's really funny
That's a
that
good
you say
point.
that, is like, because I've been saying people are talking about like, oh, drugs. I'm like, well, Adderall is a performance enhancing drug.
yeah.
It's basically like, you can put it like, why would someone want to take Adderall? So they can focus
Yeah.
on what? Focus on the work that they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Well, why do they need to focus on the work that they're supposed to be doing? Oh, so they can make money to pay rent. It's like, well, wait a minute. So let's back that up and say that, you know, the only reason some of those drugs, and those I will call drugs wholeheartedly, because those are things that
They're just lab manufactured substances.
exactly, but at the same time, what are they fixing? They're not fixing anything.
Yeah.
They're perpetuating this cycle of having a continuous, oh, well, you have a hard time focusing. Well, maybe it's not something that you want to do. You have to do it, but now you have to take something to then go and do that.
Yeah.
And what I've seen, I mean, my mom actually just started microdosing, and she started realizing like a lot of the things that she's like, I really don't know why I'm doing this. I don't like this at all. She's like, I've been taking protein powder so that I can work out in this way, so that I can build muscle or do whatever. And she's like kind of rethinking the baseline of why she's doing what she's doing. And she's 64 years old.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at it that way, it's like, so all these things that have been fed to us, like, oh, you know, take your vitamins, take your things, and you'll be okay. It's like kind of starting to deconstruct that entire narrative.
But
Yeah.
I do think that there is absolutely value in our pharmaceutical business.
Of
you know,
course.
in all of,
Of
you know,
course.
if you're getting medicated, there's totally a value in that if it works for you. And that's why I see psychedelics as an alternative option that has its own, you know, goal and purpose. And please take your vitamins. Please, like if your
course.
doctor tells you to do something, go do it. But it really does open the door to like a different perspective where when you look at it and you think, you know, this doesn't work for me. Like, there are people for whom Adderall is very useful.
Of
You know,
course.
and
But,
they're
yeah,
right. But-
I think I like your point, and this is something that I've thought a lot about too, just like in my psych world, is that like the only reason why ADHD is a problem is because it doesn't fit into the mold of how we need people to behave in school and in their work. Like, that's why that's a problem. So
in school that's designed to push people into like working 8 hours a day
Yeah.
and doing
Yeah.
nothing.
Well, but it's also like when you have, so, you know, in a perfect world, if you were just doing school, if
Yeah.
all you had to do was
Yeah.
go to school,
yeah.
then that would be fine. You would have the brain capacity to go and learn all these things, retain that information, get your degree, and move on with life. Unfortunately, now with smartphones and all this other overstimulation, your brain needs to be in 10 different places at once. You have to uphold your social norm. You have to uphold your school. You might have to have a job so that you can pay for your stuff. You have all of these different things that then the level, the brain capacity that you might have needed, you know, 80 years ago just to go to school and learn something. You're not just going to school and learning something. You're now getting thrown into life, learning how to live, figuring out how to do laundry and cook and do all these other things at the same time as learning an entire career path. So it's like, with that, yes, you're going to need a performance enhancing drug to get your brain to that level of bandwidth that it needs to get there. And that's just, it's, you know, at a certain point, it's, you know, kind of again, I have nothing, pharmaceuticals have done amazing things for people, but there's also a lot of room for abuse, just like other recreational drugs. They're one and the same.
Yeah.
There's no saying that they could be any different, because there's room for abuse for anything. I mean, McDonald's, alcohol, tobacco. There's a lot of things, too much of a good thing is a bad thing in most
But
cases.
I do think that there are definitely ways that our current society and the tools that we have ruined our attention spans. My mom talks about this all the time. But however, like ADHD, when it is fully diagnosed, like it genuinely is a lack of dopamine in your brain.
course.
Like it has a pharmacological reason. And so I don't know, I just fear the stigmatization almost of like treatment and of, like I think there is value in therapy, there's value in these meds that they like microdosing is not going to fix, and like criticizing society is super important, but I just don't think it's the whole thing,
Well, let me take that and turn on the other side, because when you say microdosing might not be the answer, but it's also for therapy especially, right? You have a single person that went to school to figure out certain problems. Well, what if somebody could fix their problems by simply microdosing and not bogging down the entire the calendar of a therapist, so that they could actually be more attentive to the people that they're. It's like the same thing with the police, right? When you have a police that's having to now handle the homeless or the what is it, the 5150, the kind of
where we should have like
mentally
community-based people who know, like, who
Well,
can support those people
there's
and not be like a
resources-
law enforcement.
There are resources for a certain thing that are then being kind of expanded to take over some of these other areas, and that's kind of the same thing with what we're talking about with Adderall. Of course, diagnose ADHD. You should. There is a solution for that.
if you choose to.
If you choose to, of course, it's your choice. However, when it starts to be put into, well, this also helps you get all of these things done in a day,
Right.
and then
There's the
that
potential for abuse. Absolutely.
exactly. And I think it's just being realistic with, and again, I think it comes back to your guys' point in the original, what we were talking about originally, is education.
Yeah.
Just educating on what is happening, to what you're feeling in your body, and what can help that.
And that's kind of that's a really important thing with microdosing, because right now a lot of the research is very anecdotal, and the studies about microdosing are not really that conclusive. And that is actually a big fear I have with this community, where as we get this out there, as companies come out there that have all these microdose things with data that just doesn't fit where I want this science to be personally, and for a lot of people, like there's a lot more education that needs to be done, a lot more research that needs to be done, and like it's a little gray period, because if somebody calls that out, like it could send it back into a stigma almost before that research is really
It
finalized.
sucks that being honest about those things is a setback.
And that's why talking about this is so important, because like we recognize those things, and so like can't hurt us.
And then on top of that, because it's like, when you look at Adderall, and it's like, okay, what are the long-term effects of it? Because you're assuming that you're going to be taking this for a long time.
Right.
Well, what if we take that away and we say, okay, well, how long do you need to microdose before you don't need to microdose anymore? Like, at what point do you actually overcome the thing that you're trying to overcome? Let's say it's depression. You don't need to be on SSRIs for 30 years because of a traumatic experience. Maybe you can microdose and come to the conclusion and find that medium and come to terms with whatever it is that's making you depressed after 6-8 months, and then there's no need for a long-term use. Instead of putting a Band-Aid on it, you can actually heal the wound that is there. And that's something that I think doesn't fit into the current scientific method of how you study something, because it's like, okay, they're not looking at how long until you're healed. They're looking at how long can you take it before something else starts to happen. And that's something that I think is going to kind of come out more and more, because a lot of people that I know, they go through their healing process. Same thing with ayahuasca. People go down, they go to do ayahuasca, and they're like, great, did it, don't need to do it anymore. I know exactly what I need to do. My life is completely changed, and that experience completely turned me 3 degrees this way, and we're going that way now.
That's why psychedelics are really interesting for me, right? Because it really does give you an opportunity, like an alternative choice. Again, nothing against SSRIs, but it gives you an alternative choice that if you wanted to like go through this therapy 3 times in 1 year, and it like studies have shown that it could have long-term effects, and that's great. And that is really, really cool, because it is kind of that short-term thing.
Well, because also on the other side of with psychedelics is like if people look at that as, oh, that's my saving grace. I need to take, this microdose, or I need to take this dose to do that. That's a dangerous conversation.
That can also
like if
be
I've met
an
people that
opportunity for
there's
abuse.
there's people that have kind of
Yeah.
dependent, and people can get dependent on anything.
On anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really come down to the drug at that point, except for that drug does have effects on them over time. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing to look at the root causes of these and how we kind of assimilate or diagnose them
Yeah.
to help them.
Yeah. I think that ultimately comes down to people having just like problems with addiction in general.
Sure.
And like if you're having, if you're addicted to any substance, you can probably be addicted to any other substance.
Sure, you see it all
And
the
that
time.
opens up,
You see
yeah.
it all the time. People that stop smoking, they start chewing gum, like just
Yeah.
like fixating on chewing gum all the
Yeah.
time. And it's like there's always that kind of oral fixation that lingers there.
Yeah.
And the same thing applies with anything, especially when it comes to dopamine and serotonin.
Yeah.
You're gonna be looking for those rushes. I mean, even with social media,
Yeah.
every
Right.
time you get a notification, bing, 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 bing. It's like
Yeah.
winning a slot machine at the casino.
Yeah.
We're
So
also being taught that more and more because of that interaction.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That pathway getting stronger and relying on that and like losing other ways to find joy besides
yeah.
that like instant ding 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 that we get.
Yeah, but you guys are, I'm sure we can talk all night about all of this, and I think it's really amazing that you guys are like this open-minded and going in this direction. It really gives me a lot of hope for, even beyond when I was there talking with people. It's like I was sitting there like, how do people not get this? And it's so refreshing to see a group of people that are actually talking about this and having an open mind and educating themselves on what's beyond just what's fed to them. But I wanted to open it up to any questions that everybody here has for these lovely ladies about what they're doing and anything else. And yeah, just one more time, round of applause for the UCSB Psychedelic.